I was interested.
Yeah?
That was dope.
Nice.
What
Are
channel
you
is that?
are you Muslim?
No, I'm not. I'm trying to remember. There's a channel. I know. Not Sam Dawah. There's another
There's
one?
there's
Smile2Jannah.
Come on.
Is that you? Is that you? No, it's
Come
not
on,
you
you
then.
know it's gotta be me, isn't it?
Yeah? Assalam.
Come
Yeah, I
on.
remember that. I remember that.
Wait, you're non-Muslim and you still know Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah. I mean,
Come on.
I grew up in a religion in Nigeria is practiced differently here. Growing up in Nigeria, well, the part I grew up, the Christians and the Muslims, they mix a lot.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
That's
so,
what I love about Nigeria.
yeah, you had like the masjid, football, we play football nearby, Rosen, you have to like go in there, sit down, you watch them learn the Quran.
Nice. What's your name?
Osas.
Osas.
Osas, yeah.
Osas.
Osas.
Oh wow. What an amazing name. Osas.
Osas.
It is a strong name.
It's short for Osaboyan.
Wow. Osaboyan.
Means God has the final say,
Osaboyan.
or God is a judge. That's what it
Osaboyan, you have spoken the truth. So that's amazing. So you're saying that there's a lot of kind of mixing and stuff like that. Do you have family that's Muslim?
means. Yeah, distant cousins.
Wow.
I read up on religion because I do this thing where, since becoming non-religious, I try to understand other people's ideas and
Nice.
at least see if I can force them to think.
Wicked.
And that's usually why I come here, to hear other ideas, because I used to be heavily religious. I was born into a Christian family, Catholic, and then became Pentecostal. And then after that, I then became non-religious. But before becoming non-religious, there's a lot of reading and trying to make sure, because in Nigeria, you don't just wake up one morning and say, I'm not going to church or mosque anymore.
That's
You
it.
have to have a very good reason and explain to your family.
That's it.
So before doing that, I made sure I knew what I was talking about. And I'm at a place now where I feel like I am grounded in my truth. And I try to talk to people about religion to get them to see why I don't think it's a good idea, especially where I come from, Nigeria, where we're heavily religious and it intertwines with our day-to-day lives, and I see that causes issues. That's why I follow a lot of these channels, like Smile2Jannah
awesome.
and Sam Dawah and all that stuff. A lot of his YouTube recommendations.
Yeah.
But I follow towards the apologetics. I see some of the opinions. Some I agree with, some I don't. And I like to keep tabs and stuff.
Osas, that's awesome. Because we are all on a journey, we have different levels of understanding, and it's awesome how you're still keeping in touch with the arguments and discussions, and you're
It's
still
never
watching.
ending. It's never ending.
That's amazing. I love that.
I'm always open to change my mind when I see something tangible that convinces me to change my mind.
So in terms of, you said some of the stuff that I was saying you found interesting. What in particular did you find interesting? And then maybe we could just go on from there.
So there was a video. This was after when the whole Ukraine thing kicked off. A lot of the points you raised there were just facts, And being a black man in the West, you connect these dots, but it's not in your face. Then to hear somebody else say these things, and it's like, yeah, it's exactly what I've been saying. It's part of the reason why I followed through. So I watched that. I watched some of the other videos. There was another one that was about. There was a fasting one I liked because we talked about how it helps health-wise and stuff like that. Although parts I disagreed with was the fact that there are studies that show that fasting also affects people negatively because they overeat, and there's actually a concern out there in the Muslim world that people become overweight, in the process of Ramadan, because when they break their fast, they eat. So little things like that. Some I agree with, some I don't.
But just to put one point in there, just before you move on, is also when you see those studies that talk about overeating, also try to connect it to which countries it's referring to, because most of those statistics are to do with the Arab nations and their GDP and their.
Reflect. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because when you have a lot of money, you can break the fast with a lot of food.
Come on.
That makes sense. And then there are things that I don't necessarily agree with, the religion in general. I think there are good ideas and stuff you can take from there. But by and large, I think, especially at a societal level, I don't think it's a good idea. I think, why? Because a lot of it is not grounded in what I understand to be true. And this is something I only realized after having done my whole 180 from being heavily religious and being very pro-God, to then being where I am now. It's what I used to do. I used to do apologetics, go to Dalston and preach and all that. When I would do that, people would ask me these questions. and I've always pushed for truth. My thing is, if I discover something as a fact and it goes against what I believe, I'm dropping that belief, because now there is truth that goes against what I thought to be true. If that makes sense?
I'm just trying to recall your name again. I know Osas.
Yeah.
Osas, yes. So it's like O and then SAS.
If you're not sure, ask me again.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah. Okay, so Osas, that is very interesting that you mentioned that. You know why? Because I would say there was more simplicity possibly about 20 plus years ago, but now because there's heavily kind of involvement in philosophy, that's why I would say probably that the argumentation and the questions have gone in it's gone in a different direction. And because of that,
understand the Dawah space too.
Yeah.
I feel like Dawah has evolved. People are pushing more for a sort of like an empirical angle. So when you hear when I talk to some of the other guys here, they argue from, they try to blend it into the Western empiricism, which is different from the Dawah you get in West Africa, which is very much a complete push against evolution, for instance. But they're like, no, of course not. It's just not true. When you come to the West, the ideas are different. They go, oh no, we're not necessarily saying evolution isn't true, but things like natural selection and common descent from like lesser animals isn't true. In other words, it's a lot more fine-tuned idea that kind of works with our current understanding of how we came to be now.
I've actually had the good fortune of going to Gambia and even Switzerland. So I would say that they're two extremes in terms of what society would say in terms of facilities for education. And it's very interesting to see when you do speak to the people. I would also draw it back to Maslow's triangle. And it actually comes down to this point that, somebody that's struggling to survive, somebody that's just living hand to mouth, they don't care about philosophy, they don't care about evolution, they care about the main principles and any other idea that comes, and it's cognitive dissonance. Like, it's difficult for them to, without understanding and education of certain imams, it's going to be very difficult for those ideas to penetrate the cerebrum, in other words. So that's literally what I've noticed. However, when you do get certain people that maybe are in the higher levels of society in terms of income, they have more time because they're not living.
Reflect on these things.
Yeah, and you can access, like, I'm doing this online course, and on this online course, you've got some people from America, you've got some people from Egypt, some people. So even the way Zoom classes happen, and like there was this one course on philosophy that I saw, and there was somebody, I think it was either from Uganda or Nigeria or Kenya, one of the three, I forget, and somebody goes, this is remarkable how me sitting in a village in Kenya, I'm able to access this university lecture on YouTube. But think about it, it's only because that person is, their stomach is filled.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
agreed.
I think that's,
Smart, right?
I think they're going that way. Yeah.
You make a good point in that the sort of explosion of access to information, even in rural areas, has improved, right? Because you have a smartphone, which is very big in Africa, because people don't really necessarily have access to steady power to have like a laptop or a desktop to sit down and Google stuff. With a smartphone, people are getting sharper. People are asking questions, right?
Yes.
It was one of the when I was reflecting, but it took a while to live religion, but thinking about it, one of the things I thought would be the biggest issue for religion would be this era we live in now, where people have access to information to fact check things that a lot of these scriptural writers didn't know we could fact check. Put it that way. And it's not just Islam, it spans across all religions, where you have claims that are made, and people can then go and look up empirical facts that can be fact checked, and then go, well, that doesn't play. Things like that. I was talking to some other guy over there. We're talking, he's a Christian. And we were talking about the predictions of the end of time. One of the predictions is that the stars in the night sky will drop to the ground like fireflies, things like that. It was so obvious, the person that wrote that thought the stars are actually that small, and they would drop and maintain that size, not knowing that the stars are massive. The sun is a star, and it's actually a small star. Just to give you an idea of how the current era we're in now, it's partly why I actually became religious as well. It's the fact that there's limitless amounts of information out there that you can use to learn and fact check things and really start to ask questions. Because that was what happened. Because I would start to ask my religious preachers questions, and they were just clueless. Because I'd go preach, give out pamphlets, and you have your answers. You have your you have your answers that are prepped from the prep training for evangelism. We call it evangelism. We call it Dawah. And when you talk to a non-religious person or somebody that has done their homework, it doesn't take long to know that this person knows what they're talking about. They start asking questions and you go, okay, I don't know the answer now, just leave that with me and blah, blah, blah. So I go back and I ask questions and the preachers don't know what they're talking about too. Or they point you to something that's demonstrably wrong and insist it's right. And I'm like, well, you don't know what you're saying. So, so it was that process that pushed me out of religion.
It's actually very interesting what you said, because... And I'm now going to take the discussion, and I'm going to prove everything that I say, obviously, that everything that you've mentioned, every single one of them, Islam doesn't fall in those traps. Absolutely and clearly not. And I'm going to back up. Everything is obviously all going to be recorded. You can fact check it at home as well. And I'm going to try and give you every evidence that comes into my mind that I've memorized, that you can at this moment be like, okay, it's here, and he's not just speaking off the top of his, just from his whims and desires. And you'll also be, Sam Dawah, you can check it afterwards as well. All right, so Osas, let's go back to the basics. As you know, the DJs used to say back in the days, let's go back to basics. So let's go back to basics, and because you've left the religion, I'm sure you're familiar with certain philosophers that even liberal and theology-based people use, and that's the likes of Descartes, yeah? So Descartes came up and he said, I think, therefore I exist, yeah? So he was talking about existence. Now, no matter how skeptical, Osas, you become, is it Osas or Osas?
Both words.
Excellent. So Osas, no matter how skeptical you are, you're standing there and you're like, you know what, Zishan? Nothing. I don't want to accept anything, nothing. Anything you say, no. All right, okay, Osas, no problem. Do you accept, Osas, that there is existence?
That there is existence? I can't prove it, but I do accept it. Yes.
You can't prove it, but you accept that there is existence, yeah?
Yes.
Otherwise, this discussion would be futile.
Yeah, it's an axiom. I guess they are
very good.
What's the name?
Self-evident proof. Yeah.
Self-evident truths that we just have to accept. You're here, I'm here, type of thing.
Excellent.
The only way we can operate, in other words, objective truth, where we can say, we look at things and go, this is demonstrably.
Yeah, excellent. So now that there's existence, we accept that there's existence. Would you say that there is, and I'm going to elaborate on this, that there is uniformity, regularity, and stability in nature? And what I mean by this is, if I was to ask you, and feel free to jump in, if I was to ask you why this watch is not randomly combusting, it's not randomly floating away, it's not randomly disappearing, or you have enough trust that when you're crossing the road, you're not just going to end up in Egypt, cars aren't just going to come in and out of existence. For us to even do science, we have to accept that there is a degree or level of uniformity, regularity, and stability, as the philosophers say. Do you accept that as a reasonable premise?
In some areas of our reality, there is stability and a sense of balance and all that.
Yeah, because if there's none, you just can't do science. It's absolutely impossible for you to do science without there being a degree of uniformity, regularity, and stability.
Definitely a degree of uniformity that is observable, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, you think about it. You know, we've got like the news, breaking news after every hour. If there was no uniformity, regularity, stability, there will be breaking news every minute. Oh, Big Ben has disappeared. It's now on top of the Statue of Liberty.
There's definitely some order to our existence.
Yeah, exactly.
In that sense. But that is, I feel like that is perceived in that, take our Earth, for instance, right? We have water cycle, sun rising up, going down, the moon, all that sense of balance. But at the grand scheme of things, it's not necessarily balanced. We have asteroids flying into Earth, we have heat death incoming, we have the sun that will expand and consume the Earth one day. In other words, whilst there is a perception of order and regularity, in the grand scheme of things, it's chaos.
Okay, so with regards to the asteroids, when they come in, there's so many layers of the Earth's atmosphere that most, I would say most, if not all, get broken up, come in. And I think it was about 10 odd years ago that there was an asteroid in Russia. And by the time it came down to our atmosphere, it came as pebbles and it just caused minor discomfort. The sun
Still comes in.
yeah, it still comes in, but
yeah, wiped out the dinosaurs.
Yeah, they wiped out the dinosaurs, but not humanity. And that's what, as humans, we say that's the distinguishing feature between us and dinosaurs.
We've had asteroids that have actually come in. Parts of it broke away, but not all of it. Big enough, and it crashed and killed people.
Yeah, killed people, but not humanity as a whole.
Not humanity as a whole.
Exactly, and that's where we then bring in certain prophecies of the Day of Judgment, and we say, look, here are the prophecies, and the two don't contradict. Yeah? For example, for us to say that, oh, this is a prophecy of the Day of Judgment, yeah, Jesus will return, the Mahdi will come, and so on and so forth, and an asteroid comes and wipes everyone out, that's automatically proven our beliefs to be false, isn't it? Because those things haven't come to pass. But as long as society is continuously living and those prophecies are coming true one by one, this is in favor of Islam and in favor of the prophecies that the Prophet said. Second thing, even with regards to the sun eventually exploding, or the grand crunch, as they say, that again is not contradicting Islam. It's actually in favor of Islam, because if we're saying that there will be a Day of Judgment where everything will be destroyed, that's in line with that. Yeah, we're saying that prophecies will take place, then destruction will happen. If destruction happens before, then you can raise the finger and say this is incorrect. However, if the order is in the timeline of the prophecies coming first and then that, we've got absolutely no issue with that. But we're going on a tangent. Remember this point, Osas, yeah? So what I said was, we've got existence, we've got uniformity, regularity and stability.
Not in all areas. That's the part I disagree with.
Okay, but when you say not in all areas, I'm talking in areas for us to be able to do science.
In areas for us to be able to do science. I would say even that's limited, because the point you made earlier about the fact that we haven't been wiped out justifies that these things are true. But if we get wiped out, there'll be nobody to question that these things are not true. In other words, we can see that stars, for instance, would expand and consume the planets around them. We know that this is the life cycle of stars. We know that Earth falls within the line, the shooting range of the sun when it tries to die, right? So are we then saying that that is the end of the world because science can see that that is coming at some point in the future? Or are we then saying, because we see the randomness of the fact that things can happen, look at a black hole, for instance, shocking things in, or you look at the fact that stars will expand and consume planets. Doesn't that suggest a sense of chaos?
Would you?
He does not get it.
It's like, you know, when a vehicle's reversing, and it says vehicle is reversing. That's what it sounds like. All right. So with regards to the sun, Walaikum salam. With regards to the sun, would you accept that before it explodes or whatever happens, would you say that we at least have, give and take, about 1 million years? Yeah, about 1 million. And would you say that's enough time for human beings, because the timeline that we have is approximately 100 years for us to colonize, say, Mars? Yeah, or even possibly travel faster than light, travel other places. So the timeline that we're dealing with, the sun exploding and all of that, again, still falls within the line that, let's just say Earth is destroyed. Who's to guarantee that we're even going to be on Earth? Who's to guarantee that we're even going to be in the solar system? So again, the timelines still form and still fall in line with theology and with religion. Whether it's the star, whether it's the sun, whether it's the sun, the star, whether it's Earth, whatever it may be. But coming back to this point, with regards to us not acknowledging science to be uniform, regular and stable, what you're doing...
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, but let's just say, you did say that there's certain aspects of that you don't accept.
Yeah, I'm saying, because what you said was...
Which other aspects?
It's the chaos of our existence, really.
Like what?
The fact that there's nothing stopping an asteroid from coming in tomorrow.
Yeah, there is. There's many layers in our atmosphere. There's at least 5 layers in our atmosphere that actually break apart the asteroid before it comes.
But that's not guaranteed.
Don't you think that's
Stop.
amazing, though?
I think it's cool, yeah.
5 layers that stop an
I mean, we
asteroid
even
coming.
have... don't we
Mars
have
only has barely one.
Don't we even have like there's an asteroid belt around Saturn that pulls a lot of the asteroids that shoot towards Earth into Saturn's orbit, so it doesn't impact Earth. So you could even argue that, that's something miraculous about that.
No, you don't have to say miraculous. You can just say, that's cool, isn't it?
That's
cool, isn't it?
The point being, we might see things that we perceive to work in our favor, but I would argue that is from, guys, we only see that because it's from our perspective. In the grand scheme of things, the universe as we know it, given what we know about the way the world works today, the way the life in general, the cosmos, everything works today, we are insignificant, and then it goes against claims that are made.
Why would you say that, and what's your basis?
What's my basis of what's insignificant? The grand scale. The fact that we are a tiny speck of dust in an insignificant part of the cosmos, right? Considering when a lot of these scriptures were written, they were written from the perspective of man, where we were in the center of the universe. So you look at old Earth models, we are the center of the universe, you have the sun rising around, you have the dome and all that stuff. These were real beliefs that people had, and then they fed into our scripture.
Quran doesn't say that, by the way, yeah? Quran didn't accept that.
Well, from what I know about the Quran, it does say that it spread the earth. The interpretation is, it's not up for interpretation, right?
No. We're not going to take the Christian way out.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's up for interpretation. I'm just saying it's based off the reading. No, I'm not giving any opinion on it. Based off the reading, saying the earth was spread.
Sorry to keep interrupting. I hope you don't mind.
No, of course not.
Okay, excellent. So you said because sometimes I forget. So you said based upon the reading. Arabic reading or English reading?
A literal reading, Arabic or English.
No, because if you're looking at Arabic reading of the carpet, which you're saying is spread out, the actual word that's used is a spiral and a spring, like wrapping around, like you wrap a turban around, and the way you wrap a turban around a spherical object. Yeah, you can't. But in English, the translation is different. In fact, there's many things that in English, that's the mistake that a lot of people make. They take the English reading and then they think that that's the default position. However, the English reading it's a very loose.
Yeah, because the way the language is written is not what it was translated to. I get that completely.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, even if you take the Quranic reading, there are things that you would read in the Quran and go, knowing what we know now, so that's not. I mean, look at the origin, for instance. Even in Arabic, I could argue, without reading the Arabic text, that the Quran suggests that we came from Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah.
What we know now goes against that. That's a good example. And my point is,
what we know at the moment, not
at the
what
moment,
we know now.
What we know now, yeah. It can change in the future.
Yeah, induction. You know the problem of induction of science. That's something scientists put to the side. So whenever you talk about science, which you have done, first, for us to even move forward, you have to prove to me that induction, because over, I would say 80% of science uses induction. Yeah, that's a conservative number. Induction is this. So today, the sun is rising. Prove using science that the sun will rise again tomorrow. The only way...
Science doesn't only operate on induction.
But I didn't say that. I said 80% of science relies on induction. So let's just say copper wire conducts electricity. What's to say that it will conduct electricity tomorrow? Water is making the seed grow. What's to say it's going to work tomorrow without falling in circular reasoning? You can't. Yeah, David Hume brought up this. Well, some say he came up with the problem of induction. Some say that it was come up before. But again, science has to tolerate induction. It says it's the inference to the best explanation. Yeah, it cannot prove induction. Yeah, so whatever we're doing today, according to science, number one, it can't deal with induction. And the other thing that you were saying, our understanding shows that this is false. No, because number one, you have to deal with 4 things. One is the replication crisis. Yeah, and the replication crisis is when you look at, and I think it was Amgen replicated certain scientific studies, and they noticed that only 11% gave the same results. and a psychological. There was one which wasn't scientific based, but it was psychology based. They said less than 50% gave us the same.
Are you saying in the hard sciences, majority of the tests that were tried to be replicated failed? In the hard sciences? I'm not talking psychology, I'm talking physics.
Yeah, that's why I gave you two.
Yeah.
I gave so the first one, Amgen, was biotech firm, and the other one was a psychology firm. Whichever a person wants to take, I'm coming from both sides. So you can check this afterwards. So this
I've
is
read up on the product. So from my understanding of it,
the replication crisis.
the replication crisis, yes, the problem of reproduction, basically reproducing tests that have been verified to be true, right? Things have been said, okay, this is the case, the phenomenon. You do this test, you get this answer.
Yes.
Now, the thing with the scientific processes is that it's baked into the scientific process, to my understanding anyway.
Say that again.
The thing with the scientific process is that replication is baked into it for it to be verified as true. In other words, for me to take what you said as true, I should be able to replicate the test you've done and arrive at the same answer.
Yes.
Yeah? Design my own test model, do my calculations, do whatever.
That's my point.
And then arrive at the same answer. But my point is that replication there is what grounds science. So when you say things like, oh, there's a replication problem, that tells me that those guys haven't done science properly. Because if you do it properly, you get your hypothesis, you test your hypothesis.
How would you do science properly? What's your criteria for doing science properly?
You have a hypothesis, right? You observe a phenomenon. Observe a phenomenon, then that induction comes into play. And you go, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's... Note all your thoughts down, and then you test to fail.
Look, what you're saying...
You asked me a question, I'm explaining.
Sorry, my mistake.
So you test to fail. By testing to fail is you test all your ideas to see the one that breaks. The ones that break, you push to the side. Until you get the one that all the ways you try to break it, don't break it. Then you take it, another person takes that same thing that you've explained, to come up with their own model, try to break it, don't break it. That's the peer review process and what I'm trying to explain. So when it's been peer reviewed, and then those guys go, you know what, I did mine, 2 + 2 is 4, 2 + 2 is 4, 2 + 2 is 4, and you have a general understanding that 2 + 2 is 4. When it's done at that level, you will not find me one scientific study. Tell me there is. In the STEM fields, that goes against that.
Right.
You will not find it.
Right. There was a reason why I interrupted, because I knew exactly where you were going, and I just wanted to save us time, but out of respect, I didn't. Go for it. There's a reason I circumvented that. Because what you were doing, you were just telling me the scientific method, which I don't have an issue with.
Because you asked me how.
But what I was saying was a biotech firm called Amgen, me mentioning these two presupposed that they're using the scientific process. Reason why I say that is because number one, they have scientists. Number two, they're following the scientific method. Number three, they have funding. Number four, they have backing. So they have all of these things. Scientific process it's a given. You can't do science without following the scientific method on a kind of industrial level. So that's why I just wanted to circumvent that.
I don't know about that though. I disagree with that because there are studies that
you can't be peer reviewed until you followed the scientific method when it comes to the STEM. Which you were saying.
Yeah.
But that's why I gave you. So this is something which is accepted. You can check this Amgen. It's a biotech firm, and it's 11%. It's on there. You can verify it afterwards. You said even if there's one, I've given you one. In fact, I gave you a psychology one as well. But so number one is the replication crisis. Number two was induction. So we've covered two. The third, this is what I wanted to get to, but in order for me to get to this, I had to cover the first two, which is interpretation of data. You got linear curves that you're checking. You got Byzantine, but Bayesian, Bayesian probability. You've got linear projections. You've got different ways. And again, there was a study done that you had something to do with footballers and red cards, and they were given the data and they were asked to interpret the data. And again, there was disparity on interpretation of data based upon the models that you're following. And of course, finally, we're dealing with P, which is paradigm shifts. I'm sure you're familiar with, which is initially we had Newton, then there was a complete paradigm shift when we went to Einsteinian physics, and again there's predicted to be another paradigm shift when it comes to quantum mechanics and quantum physics. So whenever somebody comes along and somebody says, this is what we know now, that's not understanding the philosophy of science, because science, by definition, is something which acknowledges that it's going to change, and that's one of the things that the propagators of science feel very passionate about. We don't know, and that's something that they will come and they will say, I don't know. Is this something that, can we accept evolution? No. In fact, evolution, when it comes to the current evidence that we have now, it can change tomorrow. Dawkins has admitted this himself. It can change tomorrow. So when it comes to science and using science as a yardstick, that's one thing. Yeah, where you said, okay, empirical. But I'm going to take this one step forward. You would say, okay, we take things and we have more knowledge about empirical evidence. I will argue and take it one step forward. When it comes to theology and Islam, we look at empirical, we will look at philosophical, we will look at ontological, and we will look at rational. So we will take all of these things, and our thing will be more general. Like science, it won't be able to explain why. It won't be able to explain moral questions. It can't decipher or answer the hard problems. Even give us and solve the problem of the brain and the mind problem, the mind-brain problem. Yeah?
I was going to say, the criticisms I heard regarding science, the paradigm shift, for instance, back to the problem of replicating the findings.
They're not criticisms, by the way. These are weaknesses of science, I would say, or shortcomings.
I would say the paradigm shift is baked into the philosophy of science. Because the idea behind it is, if we observe a phenomenon, and we have a scientific theory that explains it, the belief is that if you're doing, that guy is so distracting.
I'm used to him. He's Victor the Christian.
The belief is that, based on what we know, any finding supersedes that. You would never find a scientific theory that is grounded. You wouldn't have a timeline for that. From the time of Galileo, I believe, you won't find a scientific theory that has been said to be a scientific theory, as you know, I'm sure you know, that they've gone back on. What you only find is a superseding of the idea. Take Newtonian physics and was it Einstein?
Yeah.
So Newtonian physics, classical, you push something, it moves and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Push something, action, reaction, type of thing. And when you break it down into the Einstein physics, oh man, that guy is... Sorry, let me come this way.
Yeah.
When you break it down to Einstein physics, the things that have been discovered in Newtonian physics, they don't get cancelled. What has happened is the bounds of knowledge has increased. In other words, what the things that we get to interact with, at a molecular level, we can go and play around with atoms. The physical laws there don't work with Newtonian physics. Does that mean Newtonian physics has stopped working? No. It hasn't. It just means there's a better understanding of it. So I like to think of it as a sentence. Someone writes a sentence, this book is yellow. This book is yellow, and then somebody comes, this book is yellow and it has 100 pages. You would never find somebody that goes, oh, this book is yellow, now it's red. You won't find that. So that is the idea behind the paradigm shift. It's not necessarily a paradigm shift, it's an improvement of our understanding. Right?
Okay, so
the formula, for instance, Newtonian physics, all the calculations based on that, nothing has changed. Right? What they're saying is there's a limit to that, and when you get there, you have to apply another understanding of physics.
Okay, that's actually incorrect, because anytime a theory comes, unless the theory itself, they say, okay, force equals ma, or Newtonian physics, that only works in space, or that only works at an atomic level. That's not what the theory claims at all. Newtonian physics was talking about motion, whether it's motion on this planet, whether it's motion at atomic level, subatomic level, whether it's motion in space. Now, when it comes to Newtonian physics, it was not proven to be wrong. However, when it comes to quantum mechanics, it is absolutely categorically false. When it comes to subatomic level, Newtonian physics doesn't work.
Because it doesn't work at that level, that's my point.
But when it came, it wasn't said that, okay, it's only going to work at the macro level. They said Newtonian mechanic to such a degree. I'll give you a philosopher or a scientist at the time, Bernard. Who's the one that Richard Dawkins always quotes? Bernard something. He's a philosopher. Bernard. Let's just go with Bernard for now. So Bernard said, look, we've solved physics. Yeah, we're done with it. Now we can move on to something else. Yeah, to such a degree. Yeah, that people said, okay, that's fine. Like we found everything out. Einstein came and then changed everything on its head. E equals mc squared is something that it is somewhat of a paradigm because you are not allowed to question the theory of relativity. You just can't. Just like you can't question the theory of evolution at a high peer-reviewed level without being discredited or without being labeled as a theologian or like a religious fanatic or something like that.
People question every time. People question.
Yeah. I'm not saying you can't question. I'm saying yes, you will question, but not if you want to go far in your career. There's a documentary called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed by Ben Stein. Yeah. So he goes. You can watch that, and then he goes through all the case studies. It's all there. I'm pretty sure it's free on YouTube. So it is going to be a risk for your career. Same with Einstein. The only reason people are now feeling confident to challenge the theory of relativity is because of the advances that we have in quantum mechanics. Yeah. However, when something comes, and this is something, paradigm shift is something that's accepted by philosophers like Thomas Kuhn. Yeah, it's not something that they say, oh, it's science building on. Yeah, if I come and say this rule applies, that is a categorical statement. If I say
But
this,
you can demonstrate it.
regardless. The point that I'm saying is, if I come and I say this applies to the park, then somebody can say, okay, Zishan said this applies to the park. Newton, neither did the people of the science of Newton say, oh, this only applies in space. It's only when we found out that, okay, there is equals mc squared. Okay, the understanding of time, our understanding of time and space was absolutely false. Absolutely categorically false. Yeah, time and space is fabric. And the bigger the mass, the more there is bend in the fabric of time and space, and that's how we then get orbits. This is something that was not brought at all by Isaac Newton. So that was completely phlogiston. Yeah, was it phlogiston? Yeah, Hamza Sources mentions this example all the time. Yeah, this was something that was brought by the scientists, and they said, look, this is something that's in the fabric of reality or whatever. That was proven to be absolutely categorically false. It didn't exist. Absolutely does not exist. Junk DNA. Yeah, so it's junk. It does not do anything. Oh, maybe it does. It switches on and off genes. Oh, the appendix doesn't do anything. It's useless. Chop it off, lob it out, chuck it in the bin. No, it actually does affect. There's actually, our understanding is evolving and changing. When you look at and when you look at the likes of Richard Dawkins, and like the way they will talk about evolution as fact. This is something that can't be changed. It's fact. But then when he speaks on the other hand, oh well, but then an observation can come and change things. So like somebody like yourself can't come and say, oh, this is what we know. You just, if you're taking science, you cannot. Exactly. So, sorry? Go ahead, translate.
Yeah, so, sorry to say, but in the Quran, it gives us peace with not knowing certain knowledge. Is that it already mentioned?
Peace with not knowing.
Yes, there's a verse that says, you, all humans, in one way or another, are given some knowledge, not all.
So now, here it comes down to, for example, even our discussion at the start, with regards to existence, with regards to stability. A person may be able to say, oh yeah, I don't know if I exist or not, or I don't know if there's stability or not. But you are going to have to cross the road. You are going to go home and feed your kids. You're not going to go home and there's going to be 11 kids instead of no kids. If I go home and I see 2 kids and a wife there, I'm going to be happy, of course, because I'm not married. But I'm also going to be concerned. Yeah, I'm going to be like, okay, she's made my job easier, especially if, mashallah, she's good and, say she does the job, then my job is easy for me. But if, I'm saying, like, I don't go about my day thinking things are sporadically going to pop into existence and out of existence. So I guess going on from what the brother's saying,
Yeah.
is there is a degree of peace and of rationality. Like when Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Yeah, there is a degree of rationality in what he's saying. And that's where this whole kind of branch of rationalism came. Because if you take empiricism, you just can't survive on empiricism. It's just not possible.
Yeah, I mean, so with the human condition, I wouldn't just say science is the only thing that you have to operate with, because there are other aspects of life that science doesn't attempt to answer, right? But with regards to how we understand our reality, the best tool that I see that we have is the scientific method, right? So your point about people coming up with bad science or, coming up with things that are not necessarily true, that's bound to happen because they're human beings doing science, and as you know, I'm sure even in Islamic theology, human beings were flawed, right? So we're bound to have issues or inject some of our bias and all that stuff into what we do. This is why the scientific method is designed against that. This is why you have a peer review process. So when I do stuff, you don't have to trust me. You don't have to trust my opinions. Take it. This is my conclusion. Do your calculations, and then everybody does that. We compare, and when it's been peer reviewed, then we have a truth. Now that's not to say that truth will not change. It could very well be that all the observations that are being made have brought us to that conclusion. This is why the process also includes the idea that if there's a better understanding, it has to supersede that model. So it doesn't take away from the reality, the phenomenon that you've observed and things that you've checked to be true within the bounds of what you've realized before, right? So when you have Newtonian physics, all the calculations were done on Earth and all that stuff. Then they started, was it like a telescope or whatever? They used to see far.
Hubble, yeah.
Yeah. And realized that before Hubble.
Hubble was the first main one that was in.
But Einstein came before Hubble. Then Einstein.
I mean, they were on here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hubble was the first one that was put into our atmosphere.
Yeah. But the point being that there were tools that we then had after classical physics that let us know that what we know about classical physics isn't always correct. In other words, our bounds of exploration expanded. Does that mean Newtonian physics does not work in Earth? No, of course not. But as we observe other things, we go, oh, it doesn't necessarily work in that aspect. And then we then have general relativity. Now, when you take the formula from general relativity and then apply it to constants on Earth or anywhere, it still works. So the calculations you get from general relativity, you get from Newtonian physics when you're working with the same variables. That hasn't changed.
Okay, with regards to science, I'm going to disagree with you on that. You say science gives us, it's the best model that we have so far.
To engage with our reality, yeah.
Yeah, I will disagree, and I will
Scientific
say...
methods, not science.
Right,
Yeah.
no problem. I will say science itself relies on testimony. And testimony cannot be proven by science. So science, in essence, gets disproved by its own method.
But this goes back to the axiomatic truth we were talking about earlier. Do you believe in objective truth? What's true?
I believe in objective
You believe in
truth, yeah.
objective truth, yeah. So if we operate on that principle, right, and then we go, there are things that I observe, I give it to you, you do your calculations, not based off my ideas.
But bear in mind, you said peer-reviewed,
Yeah.
and you said follows the scientific method. That was your criteria. These two were your criteria.
Peer
Testimony
review
does...
is part of the scientific method.
Yeah, okay, so even if we class them both into one, even that one can't be proved using your criteria. Testimony can't be proved.
Testimony can't be proved.
Testimony can't be proved under the scientific method, yeah.
When you say testimony, you're talking observations that people make, or you're talking just testimony, word of
Yeah,
mouth?
testimony. For example, most of the things that you'll be presenting with regards to science are things that you've read in textbooks, you've got from journals. Those journals have been uploaded by companies, by JSTOR or
Yeah.
someone else. So again, you're relying...
As in you haven't done the experiments yourself.
Say again?
Yeah, as in you haven't done the
Yeah,
experiments
but yes,
yourself.
that's true. Now,
So
there's
that's testimony.
a chance that when you go on BBC or all of these websites, they might be lying, or you go on the Scientific America or whatever, and they might be lying. The only way you can deal with that is to weigh the different opinions and then make the judgment for yourself. Because I'm a layman, I'm not a scientist.
Yeah.
I just read what's out there, and then I make my conclusions, right?
Yeah,
Same thing with everything, Islam as well, right? If I want to learn about Islam, I wouldn't just come to a Shia Muslim. I talk to everybody, Sunni, and then the history, the background, then I start to get a general picture of what it is.
So that's
all it is.
yes.
So I'm just encouraging skepticism, where even with science, right, when coronavirus came out, you don't just read one source to know whether you should take the vaccine.
Yeah.
You look at different sources, different journals, and then you start to
So
form
you're
an
saying
opinion.
scientific method and testimony. You take both of them, yeah?
I wouldn't take testimony if what you're saying is word of mouth. Is that what you're saying?
No. If a scientist comes and tells you something, would you accept it? If a website that hosts a peer-reviewed journal, would you accept it? Of course you would.
I would take the opinion of the educated majority.
Right. And
on
who's
any
told you?
topic.
And who's told you that person's educated?
Who's told me?
How do you verify that person's educated?
There are ways to verify people are educated. Degrees, you can check to see they've gone
Have
to-
you ever checked an academic's before you've read it?
I have checked. There's a
Yes.
guy called Professor Dave on YouTube.
Peer-reviewed. You've gone on their peer-reviewed article and you've asked them for their degree to check.
They have links online where you can go, forums where you can read scientific papers that have been peer reviewed.
Right. So that's been photocopied and uploaded by somebody.
Yes,
Point that I'm
it's
trying to
fact
say.
checked for that. So in other words,
Yeah.
you go on a website, right? The papers you find there have been fact checked. The scientists there will be like, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're not just taking one person's opinion, right? When you go to the doctor and they scan your leg or whatever,
Yeah.
that's not just one person. You're dealing with thousands of years of medical knowledge, right? Going through that guy. So
But there have been fake doctors. Like there was this doctor
Agreed.
who'd kill. I've forgotten his name. There was this doctor that used to kill loads of people. He was all over the news here in the UK.
you can have bad faith
One
actors in
famous
science
doctor.
too.
No, but that's the thing. With that understanding, you're going to that doctor, assuming that there's this legacy of information, but the guy's a liar. Yes.
I mean, there's
But-
only so much. If you look
But
at-
what I'm saying is you have to rely on testimony, because if somebody scans something, you're relying on the person scanning something and not doctoring the document. Then if you go to his house, you have to accept that that person actually didn't reproduce that. They have the actual document. You can't go to university. Then you don't. Do you see? So I would say that it's very difficult for you to verifiably check 100% every single thing. It's impossible. So you have to rely on testimony. Yeah. You have to rely on the scientific
Educated
method.
testimony, though.
But even I would say with educated testimony,
Do you doubt your doctor?
yes. If I've gone to my optician,
Yeah.
I've had a nice conversation with him. He's given me glasses and he says, look, in 2 days, if there's an issue, come back to us. That means my optician.
If you have an issue, please come back. We've got return policy.
If there's so after 2 days, I checked my
Eyes.
my prescription, my glasses, and it just wasn't adjusting. I went there and there was somebody else there. I got it rechecked and I got new glasses made. I didn't trust them. If my doctor, if I go to him and he says, look, take these for 3 days and your stomach should be better, and I take it and my stomach is not better, I don't trust him. He's made a mistake there. I'm gonna go back. This time I'm gonna ask to see another doctor. I just remember what my mum said. Anytime we go to hospital, she always says to me, make sure that it's a doctor who knows what they're doing and not a student doctor. She hates student doctors.
Which is a good point. Now, why would your mom say make sure it's a doctor as opposed to a student doctor?
Because she wants somebody that is more trained than somebody else that's available.
Point being, they're taking it. They have more access to informed knowledge.
Yeah,
I would rather deal with somebody that has learned from thousands of professionals.
Yeah.
Because the chances are they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
As opposed to somebody that is a maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
The point being, the information that educated person is giving me has been checked. Is there a chance that they may be making a mistake? Of course. They might be dropping the ball. There might be even bad faith actors that want to kill me. But I am more inclined to lean towards somebody that is educated.
Yeah.
That's why we'll go to the doctor when we break our leg instead of doing it ourselves, even
Okay.
though it's our own body.
Now that we've established that testimony is something that we have to rely on
Yeah.
to
Educated.
do, educated testimony. MashaAllah, very good. You call it educated testimony. We call it authentic testimony. Yeah. In Arabic, we call it sahih. Sahih. That means authentic. Yeah. Now I'm about to blow your mind, Osas. You ready? Yeah. Take your headphones off. Take your top off. Take everything off. No problem. Yeah. Are you ready now?
Yeah.
Now in science, the only way to check somebody's testimony is to check, does he or she have the relevant documentation? Yeah. Are they? Yeah. Are they qualified from this? Are they from Oxford? Show me the documentation that this person's from Oxford. Okay. Now we accept what you're saying. In Islam, we take it one step forward. Yeah, when we take testimony of narrations of the Quran, of the Prophet, we'll say, okay, what's the name of his father? What's the name of his tribe? Yeah, did he have a good memory? Did he say that he was at the place that he was? Did he say that the person that he studied from was indeed the person that he studied from? Can we verify this? How many other people verify that? Are they in connection with this person, or are they detached from that person? So our testimony now is going at a higher level, to such a degree that science cannot match the testimony that Islam gives. The Islamic testimony in terms of looking at a person's tribe, in fact, it goes to the moral aspect. Has this person lied before? Was this person theologically upstanding? Did they have a good reputation in society? Today, you have certain people that are writing peer-reviewed journals, and they're coming and they're saying, a man can be a woman can be a coconut can be a tricycle.
Does it affect the science they're writing though?
It does, definitely, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you. Because the peer-reviewed process becomes compromised. And this is something that even Neil deGrasse, you know Neil deGrasse, isn't it? The famous Tyson. Yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He said this, and he's very careful with what he was saying. He's saying that there's a study with regards to homosexuality that is coming out. Now, as scientists, we're very scared, yeah, because a lot of us, and again I'm paraphrasing, I'm reading between the lines to what he was saying, which in essence what he was saying was that many scientists are scared about what's going to happen to their career, because if they align with a certain viewpoint, then their careers are in jeopardy. And there have been, it's not only homosexuality, it's LGBT and it's feminism as well. Feminists are now rejecting outright peer-reviewed journals because they are done by quote-unquote men. And these journals, these peer-reviewed journals are being done again by feminists with inherent biases. Now, you cannot remove the bias from that person. And how do you check that bias? How do you verify it? Is there an objective way of compiling and writing down that information that you and I can check? Okay, where did they get it from? What's their allegiances and stuff like that?
That is it. But this is the thing. People will always have an agenda. You understand? Even scientists. You had, I can't remember who was the one that believed in like alchemy. Some top scientists.
Newton.
Back in, was it Newton?
Yes.
Sure. And his thing was, alchemy is any science that he's discovered or any scientific theory that he's codified has to be, but the process of peer reviewing is empiricism. It removes the bias and then boils it down to the numbers and adding things up and making sure things correlate. In other words, you would struggle to get bias into a peer review paper unless the whole system is flawed. And how do we know that people that do science drop the ball? Because of the scientific process. Because a scientist later can then take that same study and say, you did this, but you were wrong here. That's the beauty of it. Your emotion does not matter. How you feel does not matter. It's the calculations. It's the bolted down, real harsh reality, right? So you would always have people with agenda that will try to inject things into whatever they are doing. What makes it stand out is the fact that I can take your belief, it can be black, white, green, blue. I take your discovery, and then I do the calculations myself, and I say you're wrong, and I can demonstrate that. So if there's any scientific finding that you bring forward that they discovered that was wrong, it is exactly because of that. Because somebody has gone back, taken that study, broken it down, and was able to show where they were wrong. You can only do that with empiricism, with no emotion.
We've already covered that though. Because of the replication crisis and because of the way the data is interpreted, that's just simply not the case. Because how you interpret that science, again, going back to your point, relies on biases. Yeah, so when you're replicating things, depends on biases. How you're interpreting the data relies on biases. Even paradigm shifts rely on biases as well. And also, I will add another thing in there as well, which is barrier to entry. People that accept, and like Stephen Myers and the likes, they talk about intelligent design. Intelligent design